Brother Posobiec from One America News, I think you're actually better sourcing this than Jennifer Jacobs. What do you got, Jack?
Well, Steve, we'll find out. What they are saying now is coming is a massive fight that's brewing and is now kicked off inside the Department of the Director of National Intelligence. And as people understand, they say 17 intel agencies, but the DNI is not an agency. It's sort of an umbrella position that sits askance over the 16 operational intelligence agencies that are producing these reports and sending them up to the DNI. So there's this idea that when the DNI signs off on a report, it has the breadth of those 16 agencies. However, that doesn't always mean that's the case. Sometimes they put together working groups to get something in. This report that's coming out 45 days after the election was required by executive order from President Trump. And here's the kicker. You've now got intel analysts inside the IC. This isn't Ratcliffe. That's the big thing here. That are saying, look, China was doing something. There is raw intelligence that is continuing. I'm told it is continuing intelligence about Chinese operations to interfere in our election. Now, we're talking about soft power. We're talking about smears and specifically messaging campaigns that they were pushing, CCP networks were pushing, to paint President Trump and his supporters as white supremacists, as bigots, as racists. They identified that, and they were pushing these narratives throughout social media, throughout their own networks. There's intelligence in Mandarin. There's intelligence in English on this. And there are senior analysts in the IC that are saying you need to include this in the report. And people, by the way, who are not necessarily Trump supporters who are saying this, but there are other analysts, and it's the same types as before, the same cast of characters who are saying, no, it's Russia, Russia, Russia. It can only be Russia. We have to go with Russia. And Ratcliffe has seen the intelligence and is saying, look, tradecraft standards dictate, and I know these standards as well as anyone else, is when there's dissent, you include the dissent. You don't shut down the report, you include it. You say, look, here's who dissented, here's where they're from, here's why they dissented. That's analytic tradecraft. That's what Ratcliffe wants to do. But he's saying that if they don't include that, the main report on the Chinese efforts here against the president of the United States, that he will not sign off on the report itself.
I want to go back to this executive order and what's driving this report, the executive order from 2018. One thing you have to do when you're on these types of things and you're trying to get to the bottom that's actionable, right? You have to separate out fantasy from reality. And I don't want to pop people's bubbles, but one of the things that in my years at Breitbart and now at the War Room and on the campaign, there's a lot of fantasists out there, okay? You got to separate out fantasy from reality. Go back to this executive order. It basically set up a whole series of things that essentially made the election a national security issue, and this is why DNI is now involved. Part of it is a report 45 days after the election that comes out. And the reason this is so important, particularly for people that have been following this and fighting this for years, is that the whole reason we're in this jam is the Chinese Communist Party. It's the CCP virus. That's the whole thing that triggered this phony mail-in voting thing. And now you've got Radcliffe, and you have other people around him who have not been China uberhawks that are now fighting for the reality here, which is the CCP's involvement to take down Donald Trump, because he's the first and to date only president of the United States that has confronted the Chinese Communist Party as the existential threat they are to the United States. So Jack Posobiec, you're a specialist. You're a naval intelligence officer assigned to the China beat. You speak perfect Mandarin. How important is this to make sure that